Hello, my little men and little ladies. How are you? Looking good? All dressed up, all shiny eyes, waiting to listen to a story. Well, here is the story, and the name of the story is, the book is a bit messy, so bear with that. The World Next Door. Can you read it? Okay. All right, and it has been written by, I forgot the name, Joan Icon. So The World Next Door has been written by Joan Icon. So here we are. Old Mrs. Quill lived in a little black and white house by the side of a wood. Next to the house was an orchard with 12 apple trees. So you must have guessed what an orchard is. An orchard is where you have cluster of fruit trees. Absolutely. In the spring, the trees were covered with pink and white flowers. In the autumn, they were hung all over with red and yellow fruit. Mrs. Quill sold some of the apples and gave many away to her friends and ate the rest. And as well, she made money by washing people's shirts and sheets and towels. She had clotheslines hung between the apple trees, and every windy day there would be white and colored laundry like flags blowing among the branches. The wind always blew on Mrs. Quill's wash days. Even the nature was kind to her, right? "The wind is my friend," said Mrs. Quill. Besides washing, Mrs. Quill knew a great deal about how to cure pain. She often went into the wood where she picked leaves and flowers and berries. From these she made pastes and pills and drinks which would send away almost any pain, right? Headache, sore throat, stomach ache, or stiffness in the legs. So you all know what stomach ache is. That is the pain in stomach. Headache, pain in head. All right, let's see what happens next. Mrs. Quill gave her medicines to people she never wanted money for her treatment, but everything in the wood is free, she said. "How do you know so much, Mrs. Quill?" A boy called Pip asked her. Here he's standing in the window and asking Mrs. Quill, how does she know so much about fruits and flowers and berries and herbs? "The wind tells me," she said. "I listen to the wind in the leaves, in the branches. The wind comes from another world. My cottage stands by the wood, and the wood grows by a mountain. In the same way, this world floats by another world, and that is where the wind comes from." Mrs. Quill's old cat, while she's peeping from her behind in the picture, Foss, purred and rubbed against her ankles. "Meow, meow, meow. Foss knows about the wind," she said. Foss, the cat, goes into the wood at night and hears it whispering secrets. One day, a big car stopped outside Mrs. Quill's cottage, and a white-haired man got out. His name was Sir Groby Griddle. That's an interesting name. "I'm your new landlord," said Mrs. Quill. He said, "I have bought the wood and the orchard and the mountain. I plan to knock down your house and put a golf course on this land. You must find somewhere else to live." She said, naturally. "Leave my house," said Mrs. Quill, "but I was born in this house. I have always lived here, and so did my mother and grandmother." "I can't help that," said Mr. Groby Griddle. "The house has to come down. You will be found another one somewhere else, anywhere you like." "But there would be no apple trees and no wood where I could find plants and nowhere to hang the washing." They were standing under the apple trees as they talked. A white sheet blew out and flapped itself around Sir Gobi Griddle. This annoyed him. All those apple trees must be cut down, he said. They are old and crooked and the wood must come. Wood must come down as well. There will be a main road leading to the golf course and a car park and a clubhouse and a tea room. The story of our lives. This is what's happening everywhere in the world in the name of development and progress. Well, there are so many people in the world, they need places to live, to play. Mrs. Quill said, my cottage is very old, hundreds and hundreds of years old. There is a law which says that old houses must not be pulled down. The wind blew again and a pillowcase flapped across Sir Gobi's face. He was even more annoyed because what Mrs. Quill said was true. So that's Mr. Gobi Griddle, very annoyed, and the pillow and the sheet flapping around him. So the wind is trying to help Mrs. Quill. You have not heard the last of this, he shouted. He stamped away. A long roll of towel blew out and wrapped round his neck. He shouted, you'll see very soon I'll always get my way in the end. Nobody came back to play on Sir Gobi's course. Where did I go? How come I've jumped? Just a moment. Oh my God. Sorry. When the page is missing, dears. Can you give me a second, please? How could this happen? Oh, okay. After that, for many weeks, Mrs. Quill was very quiet thinking. She did not often smile when people came to her house asking for headache pills or syrup for a sore throat. She was not always there. Where have you been, Mrs. Quill? The boy called Pip asked her one day as he bandaged his great knee. In the wood, tying threads round the trees. All the trees, Mrs. Quill? Yes, everyone. Why? So that they will know me again and I shall know them. Now autumn had come. Mrs. Quill's apples had all been picked. Lots of people helped her. The apples had been laid on shelves in a shed. They had a cool, sharp smell. Yum, which came floating out of the doorway on the wind. Once a year, Mrs. Quill used to catch a bus and go into town to buy needles and soap and a new saucepan and a garden fork. Things like that. Okay. This year, on her way home, as she stood waiting by the bus stop, she noticed a little black and white house on a patch of wasteland nearby. That looks like my house, thought Mrs. Quill. But then a woman asked what would be good for her. Little boys, what would be good for her? Little boy's earache and a man wanted a cure for chilblains. And then the bus arrived and Mrs. Quill got on it with her bundles. But when she came to where her house had been, it was gone. The shed had been pulled down too. Apples were lying all over the ground. Some of them had been squashed. Poor lady. And there stood Sir Gobi Griddle smiling all over his face. With his wicked smile. Men were in the orchard sawing down the apple trees. I've had your house moved, Sir Gobi told Mrs. Quill. I had it put on a truck and moved to the edge of the town. That's quite legal. That's where you'll find it. It'll be better for you there. You can go shopping and see more people. Where is my cat, Foss? Said Mrs. Quill. He ran off into the woods, said a man who was halfway through sawing down a tree. We'll find him tomorrow. We are going to cut down the whole wood. Mrs. Quill stood still for a moment. Imagine her memories, her attachment, her association with those. Oh my God, poor lady. And such a nice and kind lady. Then I'd better go into the wood now, she said to Sir Groby, and she added, you're going to miss that wood. You're going to need it. And the orchard by orchard that your men have cut down. You will be thirsty. All you can think about will be an apple. Your head will ache in the hot sun. All you need will be shade, but there'll be no apple for you and no shade. Oh, a dry gust of wind blew from the wood and flung a handful of leaves against Sir Groby. They stung his eyes and scratched his cheeks. He shook his head angrily and rubbed his eyes when he could see again. Mrs. Quill was walking away from him into the wood. There he is. You can see Mrs. Quill into the woods, and he is looking aghast and wondering what to do. Let her go, silly old fool, he said. She'll come out soon enough when we start cutting down the trees. But Mrs. Quill did not come out of the wood. And when next day Sir Groby's men began cutting down the trees, a queer, strange thing happened. As each tree was cut down, it shrank like a slip of paper when you set a match to it, and vanished clean away. At the end of the day, instead of a huge pile of tree trunks ready to be sold for timber, there was just nothing at all, only some mud and a few leaves. The roots were dug up and the land made flat and level. A golf course was laid out and a car park. A red brick clubhouse was built with a flag on it. It all looked very dandy and very inviting and neat and organized and very developed. But very few people came to play golf on the golf course. The ones who did told their friends that at night after playing, they had bad dreams. They dreamed they were trying to play golf in a forest. Trees and bushes grew up all around them. Leaves and prickles grew out of the golf clubs. The balls rolled down rapid roads. Oh, queer, strange, creepy dreams, isn't it? Let's see what happens. And then nobody came back to play on Sir Groby Griddle's course a second time. He made no money from it. The clubhouse stood empty. The flag dangled down from its pole. No wind ever blew. It was gone with Mrs. Quill. Sir Groby himself fell ill. His head ached all the time. Nothing would help the pain, the ache. All day long he was thirsty. He drank water, beer, milk, soda, wine, tea, coffee and champagne. But no drink would make the thirst go away. And every night he dreamed about walking in a dark wood and listening to the wind. At last he was so ill that he had to be taken to hospital. Where is Mrs. Quill? He kept asking. And why does the wind never blow anymore? The wind is blowing, Sir Groby, the nurses told him. A gale is blowing outside the window at this very moment. Can't you hear it? Shh, shh. But he could hear nothing. He lay ill for weeks and weeks. Nobody cared about him, so nobody came to see him except a boy called Pip. I dream about Mrs. Quill every night, Pip told Sir Groby. In my dream, I see her living in a cottage with a wood and her orchards. She's living in the world that floats next door to this one. You won't see her again. I don't want to hear about your dreams. All I want is something to cure this awful thirst, croaked Sir Groby. When I see next Mrs. Quill in my dream, I'll ask her, said Pip. Next day, Pip came to the hospital again. He said, in my dream I asked Mrs. Quill about your thirst. He told Sir Groby Grill. She says that only an apple from her orchard will cure it. I don't believe you, growled Sir Groby. That's rubbish. In any case, her orchard is cut down and there are no apples left. A sudden gust of wind blew through the hospital room where Sir Groby lay. The window curtain sailed inwards and wrapped itself round Sir Groby's angry face. There he is, petrified, angry and scared. A mean old man, wasn't he? And a shower of dead leaves swept through the window like arrows and landed all over Sir Groby's bed. Good gracious, cried a nurse, coming in, and she ran for a dustpan. Sir Groby lay scowling and said nothing at all for the rest of the day. It got him thinking. That night he dreamed that he was standing on the edge of the world, looking across the gap at the world that lay next door. There was Mrs. Quill's black and white cottage, beside the orchard, beside the wood, beside the mountain, just like it was before. There was Mrs. Quill herself hanging out her washing sheets and towels and pillowcases among the old twisted apple trees. I am thirsty, called Sir Groby across the gap. Oh, Mrs. Quill, won't you help me? I'm so terribly thirsty. But Mrs. Quill took no notice, just went on begging out the towels and tea clothes. You know, those pegs are clips which you put on top of the clothes when you are spreading them on the line so that it won't fly away with the wind. Mrs. Quill, I'm sorry I moved your house. I'm sorry I cut down your orchard. I'm sorry I cut down your wood. Won't you please tell me what will stop this awful thirst, At that, Mrs. Quill turned and looked at him. Just being sorry is not enough, she said. Hundreds of creatures had their homes in that wood. Birds, mice, foxes, squirrels, yes, rabbits, spiders, adders, bats, otters, hares, weasels, right? How can you put right the harm you did? But I'm so thirsty. Only an apple, Mr. Groby, from my orchard will cure your thirst. But there aren't any left. They were all squashed and trampled on. But I have just 2 left here, she said. See if you catch one. And she threw an apple across the gap. She flung it. See, she's flinging it. And now Mr. Groby is learning his lesson for being rude, for being nasty, for being mean to the old lady, her home, her feelings, emotions, and the mountain, the wood, and the forest. That's right. Finally, Sir Groby was not able to catch it. Down it fell, down and down into the gap between the worlds, and was lost. Oh, after that, let's see what happens. After that, just checking. Okay, Mrs. Quill turned and walked away into her orchard. And Sir Groby, crying and wailing like a 2-year-old, no, woke up from his dream. Next day, he told the people at the hospital that he wanted to leave and go home. But you're not better, they said. I shall never be better if I stay here, said Mr. Groby. He sent for a car and a driver to come and fetch him. On the way to Sir Groby's home, his car passed the bus stop where Mrs. Quill had got her bus. But there was no black and white cottage on the site where Sir Groby's men had left it. Just a bare patch of ground with some bits of paper blowing about. The boy Pip was standing and looking at the empty space. Sir Groby opened his car window and called, "What happened to Mrs. Quill's house?" "It has gone." "It has gone," said Pip, "just like the trees." Sir Groby went home to his large, grand mansion of a house. He ate roast beef for his supper and drank champagne. But his head just ached just as badly as ever, and he was still thirsty. At night, as he lay in bed, he heard the voices of all the creatures he had turned out of their homes, crying, grieving, squeaking, squawking, chirping, cheeping and chirruping, all the squirrels and the birds and the robins and the foxes and the weasels and all the little rats, whatever, so many animals lived there, it's unbelievable. And they all had been displaced. So this is what we do to nature. And we hurt these little animals when we knock down trees or plants. He dreamed that he saw Mrs. Quill busy in the world next door, hanging out a washing. The wind was helping her. "Mrs. Quill, I will plant another wood. I promise, I promise, I promise, I beg you," he called to her across the gap. "Only please, please, please throw me one of your apples. I'll plant another wood and an orchard beside it." There he is, across the gap, across the world, speaking and requesting, "Mrs. Quill, the gentle, sweet lady." At that, she turned and looked at him more kindly. "Well," she said, "I have just one more apple," she said. "See if you can catch it this time." She tossed an apple across the gap. This time the wind gusted and blew the apple so that Sir Groby was just able to grab it. But as he was about to take a big bite of it, he woke up. Oh, what a blow that was to wake up and find he had no apple in his hand. It was just a dream. Oh, Sir Groby, well, I can do here. Oh, no. But then he struggled out of bed and dragged on his clothes and picked up his telephone and gave orders for the golf class, and for the clubhouse to be pulled down and the car park dug up and the golf course plowed all over. He ordered his car and told the driver to take him to the golf course. On the way, they passed by the bus stop where Mrs. Quill's house had been left. Sir Groby noticed that the empty waste patch was all covered with small green shoots with young new leaves on them, for it was spring by now. So Groby told his driver to stop and got out of the car. The boy Pip was standing and looking at the small trees. "They are all seedling apple trees," he said. A warm spring wind was blowing. It tossed the sprigs and leaves of the little seedling trees. The wind had a cool, sharp smell. Things are being restored, right? You can see from the saplings of the apple trees, and they both are ogling at the small plants and trees coming out, and the wind had a cool, sharp smell as it blew against his face. Sir Gobi felt that the wind had come from a very, very long way off. Perhaps from another world, perhaps from the world next door. And so everything, the orchard and the mountain and the forest and Mrs. Quill's cottage was brought back. Everything was restored to order like it had been there for hundreds of years. So now Mrs. Quill was back, and Mr. Groby Griddle's headache finally was cured. And he apologized. Mrs. Quill, he heard her singing and humming in her cottage. He went and visited her, apologized, and promised that he'll never hurt a plant or an animal ever. And he will be good to this planet Earth. We need the planet Earth as badly as the animals do, don't they? So it was all restored, order was restored, and things were as they should be. And the kind little lady, Mrs. Quill, lived happily ever after, treating and looking after the animals and the town people. I hope you enjoyed the story. I loved it. And in this day and age when things are really going bad because of global warming and lots of changes in the weather, we need to grow trees, we need to plant flowers, right? Each one of you, if you promise to plant a tree or a plant, you'll be so happy. The earth will be happy, yes, and we'll have a nicer, cleaner earth to live in. Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed the story. I enjoyed sharing it with you. It was great fun and a pleasure to see you all. So see you next time pretty soon. Love you. Bye-bye. Trying to turn it off.